Welcome everybody for joining this fifth year anniversary of the PLM Green Global Alliance. And today we want to look back and also look forward on what is happening in the domain of sustainability. And for that, I want to start with Rich. Rich was the initial founder of the PLM Global Green Alliance. And at that time, we talked a lot about climate change and the focus on climate change. So why did you start the PLM Green Alliance, Rich? And what are you, I would say, experiencing now with your battle against, I would say, climate change?
Yeah, man, a lot has happened in the last 5 years, hasn't it? I started it really for pretty selfish reasons. I had been a bit of a closet environmentalist over the years. I'd worked in aerospace and defense and in energy industries as consulting. And so I was just in the late teens, I was really kind of astonished how little conversation there was about the role of PLM in transitioning to a cleaner, greener economy. There's really not much talk or chatter out there on any of the professional circles. So, I really did it because I was lonely and I wanted to find other people like you all who were attending this meeting who shared some of my same values. And not only that, but I wanted to end my career as I'm powering down. I wanted to end it trying to align my professional work with a little bit of my personal values, which is very difficult, especially in the American form of capitalism. And I guess so that's the selfish reason I did it. And I wanted to find some comrades out there that felt the same way that I did. But then on the other side, I really wanted to create a space or a platform where others like me could participate in things that were helping to green their communities, their economy, their industry, or their own jobs maybe outside their employment if their employer wasn't actively do that. And, if you look at our mission statement, I've got that our mission is to collaborate, educate, and advocate. And those are three of my favorite things to do, I think, over my career, starting out as an engineer and then moving into PLM and various other things over my life. So, and I didn't do this for business reasons. I didn't do it for revenue or commercialization. I certainly didn't do it for glory or fame. And the other thing is I didn't feel like I was the best person to do it. I didn't feel like I was the most qualified person to do it, or the best known person to do it, the most respected person to do it. I just felt like when 2000 came around, I was probably the only one willing to do it that had the time to do it. And because I was an independent consultant, if it blew up or didn't go right or someone didn't like what I said, the cost would only be to me. It would not be to my employer.
Okay. But
And
if
I feel very
okay.
fortunate to have found all of you to have worked along in this association. We've learned a lot. There have been some surprises, and we can talk about those here in a few minutes when you're ready, in terms of what we've learned and what's been surprising.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm curious, Rich, what have you learned in those 5 years? I think 5 years ago the world was completely different at that time, and when we started.
Yeah. Well, Jos, I remember one of the first conversations we had, and for those of you who aren't familiar, I found Jos because he had written a blog post around when was that, Jos? Was it the 2000 knots? It was maybe 10 years earlier
Yes.
on.
I compared the introduction of PLM with climate change. We know we have to do something, but we don't do anything, and we just let the
Yeah.
business go on. Yeah.
Yeah, so I found Jos, and I think one of our first discussions is you were kind of quizzical. You said, "Well, what does PLM have to do with climate change?" And my hypothesis at the time was it did indeed have a role. When I say PLM, I'm talking about like the SIM data definition. I'm talking about all the enabling technologies that allow the execution of a PLM strategy. So that's PDM, it's MBSE, it's CAE, it's CM, it's DM, it's CAD, it's CFD, and the list goes on and on. So what I believed is that PLM and those enabling technologies did have a role in helping to assess climate change, to reduce carbon emissions, to mitigate the damage, to help industries and communities and economies adapt when the damages couldn't be mitigated. And then it did have a role in helping to transform overall to a more sustainable economy. So that was what I felt. And now if you look at the work that our moderators have done that are present here today, I think there are a lot of examples out there where PLM technologies are doing exactly that. So I think that, what I learned was that, yes, it does have a role. People are willing to speak out. And I think one of the most encouraging things, especially in a relatively sour time in the US, is just the globalization of the effort. I mean, I think my heart was warmed by seeing so many people around the globe carry the ball and know that fighting climate change was not just a technical challenge, but it was a moral and civic imperative. And we do it not only for ourselves, but for future generations. Mark's spoken about that, I know, in some of his SimData webinars, as well as you. So I think that enthusiasm from around the world really helped to carry me through some dark times here in the U.S., as it still is. So that's one thing I really learned. And I think the other thing I learned is that the variance and interest and participation of the solution providers. When we started this, Jos, back in around 2000, I wasn't sure how enthusiastic they would be to touch climate change and green energy. And I've been surprised by how some vendors have fully embraced that, especially under the tenet of sustainability. But then I've also been equally surprised how some vendors have been very scared of even using the word green. And of course, we called ourselves the PLM Green Global Alliance, not because of a political party. We did it because of of greening industry, of lower carbon emissions. That's why we did it. And so some vendors have been very supportive. I can think of like PTC, extremely supportive in what they're doing, and many that you and Klaus have interviewed, and others maybe not so much, or maybe they are, but they're just not willing to talk about it in this political environment. And then I think the final thing I've learned, and that I'm willing to speak of a little bit later after others have had a chance to talk, is just that despite our enthusiasm for the technology alone is not going to save us. And I know many of you have spoken about that in some of your presentations. And it's going to take a lot more than technology, and that's a worthwhile topic for us and maybe the other participants here in the group to speak about. And I guess maybe Mark will talk a little bit about what we've seen in climate change and decarbonization.
Yeah.
And finally, the last thing I learned from you, Jos, was that when you frame fighting climate change under sustainability, there's a lot more support for sustainability, because sustainability actually is good for business, it's good for communities, it's good for governments. Yeah. So sustainability is much more positive. And when you think of fighting climate change, and you think of it as one of the many tenets, one of the 17 SDGs of the UN, and you think of it under sustainability and the intersection of PLM and sustainability, that's an easier sell than just talking about climate change.
Okay. Thanks, Rich. And maybe for people who want to react, there is a react button where you can raise your hand, and then I will give you the stage. I think, when you mentioned that the move to sustainability. Personally, I have the feeling that the word now sustainability becomes as vague as PLM. Maybe what is PLM? What can it do? Sustainability. Now also we need to be more precise. Anyone who wants to chime in what Rich said? We have for this topic 2 more minutes. I'm the timekeeper too.
Maybe to give a big thank you to Rich, because when you bring everybody together to this group, the individuals like myself, seeing what happens on internet, if there are any activists or whatever discussion on the topic of sustainability existing in PLM world, I was very happy to found this group and to join you guys. So thank you very much for this, Rich.
Okay, thank you, Evgeniya. And anyone else? Otherwise, we move to the next core team member that was there from the beginning, Klaus. Or Erik, you want to react first?
Yeah, just a short comment on what Rich said. But basically, I think we agree that we have all our passion for sustainability, and I fully agree with Rich. On the other hand, what I learned, that it's nothing which can be done on yourself or just for a single entity. And that's what I like about this group, that we are coming together, and sustainability is a joint effort for all together from all perspectives. That's important. And that's what I like at Rich comments, basically.
Okay, thanks for that. And yeah, now then switching to Klaus. Klaus, we have been doing the interviews with a lot of PLM related vendors and PLM vendors on sustainability, and I think that was a good interaction of understanding also the space where we are. You historically have the knowledge of life cycle analysis in the SAP ecosystem. Uh, how have your experiences evolved? I mean, when we started 5 years ago, LCA was at the early days. Where are you now? And what is driving you?
Yeah, I mean the main reason. So I'm an environmental engineer by trade. So I studied this in the 90s, but back then couldn't find a job. So I went basically to PLM to make money. And later on, one of our customers came to us and put three big books on the table and said, "Okay, these are our life cycle assessments. What now? So how can I actually use these data for my engineers or for my business to really use it?" And this is when I basically came to the Green Alliance and also raised the questions: how can we use assessments, if it's LCAs or carbon footprint or whatever, how can we actually use this kind of information to really change the business, to feed back the information to the business owners and to the engineers and the designers. And this was for me the first initiative, and I think we came a good way. This was back in the 2005 or so. And I think there are now tools available to do exactly what I was asking for, right? So there are several tools where engineers can roll up their carbon footprint if they design a new product. There are tools where you can automate these calculations, where you can simplify the life cycle assessments so that businesses can really use it. So the change I have seen over the last year is it basically came from these LCA, what was really science driven, to a stage where we can utilize this data really to make business decisions and change the business.
And then do you see it happening? I agree with you that the tools are getting better, but also you need to have the skills to use the tools, and you need to have an organization that is pushing you to use the tools. Do you see progress in that direction?
Well, they are up and down. So I think what I'm still missing generally, or on a global stage, is that these idea of LCAs is not incorporated into the education of engineers today. So this is, I think, the biggest challenge. Life cycle assessment is a science in itself. And if you don't understand what's actually going on there and how this is calculated and how impacts really are applied to data, then it's hard for engineers to use the data and get it going. So I think this is my biggest complaint, that LCA should be part of each engineer's training from the get-go. And then you're right, there are some tools. They can always be better. I'm always pushing for better tools, of course. But there are ways where organization can use it. What I found very interesting is everyone basically outside of these organizations tell me that, oh, now with the political environments, more conservative input in Europe and the political situation in the US, does the business not slow down? And this is not what I'm seeing right now. It's correct to say that the discussion is a little bit more difficult, but at the end, customers who really embrace this kind of technology and who wants to improve their business, sustain and make the business sustainable, they go ahead because they know these kind of information and these kind of processes will really help them to sustain their business. And it's not too much about green or climate. It's really the question how I can sustain the business. And there are,
Exactly.
maybe we can talk
Yeah.
about this a little bit later. There are
Yeah.
many situations right now in the business world where we can point to, I told you, corporate sustainability is something good.
Exactly. And I think what we discovered also in our discussions, sustainability is also a driver for digitalization of companies. So they go hand in hand. And companies that I would say want to be sustainable, and that is also their business in the future, and they really have to invest in those technologies, and they are investing because they see it is mandatory, and they cannot run on the waves of politics and the mood of the society.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that was also one of the topics. It's about digitalization. If we talk about the tools and capabilities in the PLM domain that are driving.
Yeah, this is the next step, right? If you know how to determine something manually, then you want to automate it because you don't want to sit down and do the calculation for greenhouse gas every year or for products every month. So you want to have this automated so the data are available quickly for the business.
Yeah.
So digitalization is really a big topic in this regard. And I mean, you see with the regulations in Europe and the reporting regulations, I know companies complain there's so much work, but the truth is that this is something they should have put in place 5 years ago and have it ready going, because the technology is not the challenge here anymore. It's really to put it in place and feed the data and get the results.
Yeah. I mean, I see we have Patrick also in the audience, quite active with QCM on the digital product passport discussions in Europe. Maybe you can add your perspective also, what is happening in Europe, in your environment.
Yeah, so getting the data is we get a lot of questions. Where do we get the data? I mean, making the data model, or let's say the information model, the processes is not the problem. It's where to get the data from, who can provide it, is it good enough for us? But I think that this will need to evolve now, or let's say had already been should have been evolved. But the digital product passport lives by data that is defined or used or controlled in the development phase. So that it's really important to get that data and then start using it in those let's say those LCA studies, etc. Yeah.
Okay. So we really get into a typical PLM discussion about data. I think so. Here you see the niche that we are in with the PLM Green Alliance. It is very close to also modern ways of data management and treating data. Anyone else that want to add something to
I have a
this?
question for Klaus.
Go ahead.
Klaus, I know that you work in a lot in the SAP world. So do you see the ERP powers within your customer base? Do they think that data management belongs exclusively in the ERP systems, or is there still that historical conflict between ERP and PLM, or do you see that maybe this is bridging the gap and bringing them together?
I think the idea that data belong to the one or the other system is long gone.
Yeah.
We are not discussing any more integrations of PLM systems into SAP or something like this. It's more the question if we can build a data lake, or however you want to call it, where every system can put data and can pick data from. So you cannot. I think the ESG reporting, for example, brought this really to daylight. You have so many systems where you have the information, and if you cannot collect them on a central place, but have to hand it over from one system to another system to another system, this is not sustainable. This will not work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the question, if of course SAP PLM, for example, has its advantages because it's closely embedded into the ERP side, but there are also advantages to have separate PLM systems. And if you take the meaning of PLM. It doesn't matter if it's here or there. You have to find a management way how you contain the data and manage the data over the life cycle. And where they are doesn't matter at the end.
Exactly. That's a good statement about the future of a digital enterprise where all those systems are connected. Then I want to switch to our next member, Mark. We know each other from a long time, from GE, from ARAS, from SimData. And at the moment, you are the sustainability and green energy consultant at SimData. And you were the ones in one of the interviews that also discussed with us the Keeling curve. Still a point of reference, what is happening with carbon emissions. So in your current practice, you meet a lot of companies. What's happening there? What are the discussions at the board level on sustainability?
So, and when we walk into companies and they're discussing sustainability, they're also in a situation where their product lifecycle strategy needs to be improved, right? So it's not just sustainability,
Exactly.
but there are issues with cost, operational efficiency. Almost always, I would say always, the data is somewhat siloed. So there are a lot of issues that need to be worked out, which are moving from their old PLM strategy, which is more like a PDM plus strategy, a lot of PDM in engineering, but not throughout the entire life cycle. And then there is an absolute focus. As Klaus was saying, we now have, 5 years ago, we didn't have many options in terms of tools to look at lowering the product carbon footprint. Today we do. So, I used to, years ago when I was younger and I managed designers, I had no insight and nobody cared, but I didn't have any insight into the carbon dioxide equivalent when I was looking at my bill of material. Today, you absolutely can manage that and other KPIs that a particular company is interested in. Related to that is more and more they're trying to reduce waste, embracing more circular concepts, and finally, I would say further down the life cycle, but they work hand in hand with how engineering has to have all these insights, because that's where all the environmental impact decisions are made. The supply chain is where most of the carbon emissions are at. So working on their supply chain can help reduce the scope 3 emissions, along with, and you guys mentioned digital product passports and things like that. So those are 3 areas that we see where companies are very active. Despite the, political things, if you pick up and read the paper, it could be fairly depressing. The actual companies know they have to do this. They are doing it, because if they don't do it, the costs end up being higher. So there's kind of like a 4th category, and that's more like climate risk and resilient management. Like,
Exactly.
What if I didn't do this? And you're going to end up paying a lot more, and you'll be a lot less ready if you're not really focused on this. So, it's not as hot a topic as, say, AI, but it's right there, right? So
exactly, yeah. As you said, maybe the word sustainability is not everywhere, but it's risk mitigation for the future, to protect your business, not to be, I would say, harmed by regulations or things that are going to happen in the near future. And I think in the interviews we had with some other vendors like MakerSite and a priori also, they call sustainability the fourth dimension. We still have cost, quality, and time, and then we just have another dimension to manage in the process.
Very much, and I think the one key point, and I've seen it proven out by vendors that have introduced me to some of their customers in some areas like supply chain and in on the factory floor, we're reducing the electricity and consumption. I mean, they're saving as much as like 20% in manufacturing. So this idea that it would be very expensive, it would be extra work, whatever, is actually not true in several areas. So you should be saving, you should be looking at doing this and improving your supply chain, improving your operational efficiency on the shop floor, further automating how you get your work done across a digital enterprise. And if you're looking at it that way, you're going to end up with better value and sustainability embedded throughout the product life cycle.
Mark, as the energy expert, where do you see the energy transition happening? Is it happening everywhere?
So, well, everywhere. Overall, it's absolutely happening, right? And just from, and for those of you that don't know me, I kind of accidentally got my start in energy because my neighbor was decided to build a wind turbine when I was like 16 years old, and I'm helping him. And he was a nuclear engineer and became a rather well-known one. So I got early introduction into all sorts of forms of energy. So energy and electrification is exploding. I mean, this is the fourth year in a row where banks are investing more in green technologies, and in this year, far more than they ever have in, say, the fossil fuel industry. So again, despite what you think you're reading in papers, the money is actually still moving towards green. A major reason for that is China. They added, every year they add more renewable capacity in 1 year than the United States has in its history. So they are dominating renewable energy from not only internally using it, but what they export in their products and components and wind and solar and you name it. So it is growing on all fronts. Now, where the other part that you mentioned was where? Well, there's obviously still pockets of people that can't either afford it or they don't wanna. They have ties to the oil industry. So it's clearly a big deal in China. It's clearly a bigger deal in a lot of the European countries. It's definitely hit a bump in the road in the US, but hopefully that won't last for more than a couple of years. And then, the emerging markets, it's kind of a mixed bag, and some of them is really taking off. Others, they can't afford it.
Yeah, right. And then in parallel, we see this now dramatic increase in energy demand because of AI. And now, as Klaus already said, the nuclear plant at your neighbor's house now has to become operational.
Yeah. So nuclear has taken off too, and that's it takes a little time. But AI is pretty interesting in that a lot of the large providers, Amazon, Meta, Microsoft, whatever, A lot of companies, the easiest way they can reduce their emissions is through a purchase power agreement. And when they're using Amazon, they want that to be renewable energy. So in building all this, and this is like somewhere between 3 and 5% of all the energy needs. In the US, it's as much as 16% in the next several years. They want that to be renewable. Now, you know, the issue is, can they build out the renewable as fast as they need the energy? But that actually should be a good thing for renewable energy.
Okay. So because of the time, I'm going to switch to Evgeniya. Evgeniya, you are representing Simpa PLM Services, and you joined the PLM Green Alliance as a moderator for initially the circular economy, and also you had a lot of life cycle analysis experts in the company. We had an interview together with Klaus, with two of your colleagues. We heard, at least I hear a lot about life cycle analysis and less about the circular economy. What is your perception on that? Are companies working on a circular economy?
From my perspective, in Simpa PLM Services, we are combining different companies, but the majority of our clients are aerospace industries, suppliers, or aircraft builders, and so on. And from this industry perspective, I would say that LCI is more, I would say, mature and more easy to, because within the companies we are working with, and as Klaus said already, the methodology is based on ISO standards. We have quite a lot of solutions to doing the life cycle analysis, and we can apply it to the product part or the industrial procedure or the whole product, and it allows the companies to be more performant on the sustainability reporting and to better communicate with their customers as well. So I would say you had more about the LCH, more easy to implement, and it can be scalable. And when we speak on the circular economy, the topic is extremely complex, whatever industry you take to speak about. But in aerospace, it's much more complex, I think. And it's remain, as you said, Jos, and it will boost the digitalization, because if you would like to integrate circularity into the aerospace industry, everything is complex. The safety standards are complex. The product life cycle are extremely long, and the supply chain is complex. And each part of this process should be ready to contribute to the circular economy. And as you mentioned as well, the digital product passport starting to be more and more present, especially in Europe. And unfortunately or fortunately, it's always the mandatory requirements to the companies who boost sustainability. And in aerospace industry, the digital product passport will be here and mandatory for all the actors in 2027. So we are starting to prepare to this. There are the readiness assessment are already running within the companies. The big company investing quite a lot to be ready for this new regulation. And I would say, from my perspective, the circular economy topic will be much more increased the next year and in 2027 in aerospace industry.
Some years ago, I was in an Airbus seminar, and they said we are already quite circular because our products live long. They have a lot of refurbishment, repairs, etc. They are designed for a long life cycle compared to consumer goods, for example. And it's more that they said that the renewable fuels that are our biggest challenge on the aerospace.
I would say that the biggest challenge is traceability of everything, then to reintroduce the things and repair the parts and reuse the parts and know which kind of materials were used for those parts, and now we are come back to the LCA topic, you know.
Yeah. And although aerospace is famous for its traceabilities and the need for traceability and the validation, also they have good margins, so they can invest in methods. I spoke to somebody from the automotive industry, and they said we don't have the time and people to invest in this type of traceability because we are too low margin, too lean in our operations. Do you see that also? Are you working also with automotive companies?
We are working with automotive companies, but more on the LCA topic here in France and a little bit in Germany. Yeah. But when I think circular economy, it's very large concept. It's like a PLM, even larger, I would say. It's everything. So that's why I think it's a little bit frightening for everybody to change completely the paradigm of the nowadays business to come to the circular economy. But hope.
Yeah, one of the drivers for the circular economy should be, of course, the materials scarcity. Now, for example, the fight for batteries, and that's, for example, that might also push manufacturing companies to work more in a product service system than instead of just selling products to the market. Any one of you who have experience with that at the moment?
Yeah, we work with companies that are trying to be more circular. You see this a lot within energy companies themselves, where it's kind of to their benefit to go off and design things for disassembly, be more modular, and recycle or partner with other companies that can help recycle what they do. So it can be not just a good thing, but valuable. In other words, they can reduce their costs.
Exactly. I think a lot of the circular economy initiatives is about also reducing costs. I mean,
right. And some of them, in some industries also, there's if a company they get very good at things like digital twins, and they can start offering their product as a service. And when they offer their product as a service and you're competing with them, you could potentially have a problem. So that's where being more circular becomes very, very important. And if you look back 10 years ago, you wouldn't find anybody doing that. Now, in many industries, companies are starting to do it.
Okay.
And it's also the change of the business perspective. We worked with the company who produced the trucks, and in fact they completely changed their model, so they remain the owner of the trucks. They no more selling the trucks, and they're selling the services. So it starts to be valuable model, but I think to switch this model and to bring it to the aerospace market, it will take maybe some time.
Yes, there are completely different industries. I mean, and yeah, I think the closer you are to the consumer, for example, I once mentioned also the Fairphone, which is a modular telephone that you can upgrade. They have the challenge with their business model. They are not as fast as the big phone companies because those phones live too long. And we have to get
also
used to
think that so I don't see too much discussion about circularity in my customer base. And I think the reason is that you really have to embrace this. You have to change at the end your business model, right? And I'm not sure if all companies have a leadership who can stand up and say, okay, we change our entire supply chain and we change everything in the business. So I think this is circularity is a bigger challenge than improving specific KPIs.
Would really help. It's the regulations. We say works quite well, and this clarity, like with titanium in many industries. And now it's the circular economy main topic, titanium. thanks what despite the economical and the political situation of the world.
I think it's changing. I mean, we have been at a large automotive OEM about 4 weeks ago. They invited us for discussing disposal planning for during the design phase already. So some indications. Also, we have been invited by a transportation provider about talking about disposal and calculating sustainability for disposal of products. So there are some indications that we're moving in this right direction, and the awareness is coming.
Exactly. I think maybe Klaus, you were thinking about a fast change in business model. I think it will be very gradual. Companies have to learn first to connect to their customers, because then you can also have a product service system, and then it will come. But Erik, jumping to your area of activity, together with one of Evgeniya's colleagues, Matthew Sullivan, you started the Design for Sustainability work group. Before we knew you already from eco design in your previous job. What is your passion for design for sustainability, and where are we going with that at the moment?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm very happy to work together with my brother in crime, Matthew Sullivan from Simpa, on this topic, and we share the passion for this one. And in fact, by listening to you, a lot of discussion was about basically how to calculate existing sustainable impact. When I started to think about this topic, I thought that's very short-minded, because at the end, it's about the change of culture and all mindsets. And me personally, as a mechanical engineer, was pretty much educated in the 3 dimensions of product development. So time, cost, and quality have to be reduced or increased. And then I thought, no, the culture will change in the future. So in the future, we work towards the direction that we establish sustainability as a 4th dimension and should be in everyone's mind. We talked a lot about PLM and ERP, and in fact, we have to consider the entire life cycle. So it should start with requirement definition. That's where we're moving to. So me as a mechanical engineer, of course, very much educated in design, I thought the biggest impact for sustainability is already being created during the design phase. So this 28-80 Pareto, which means 20% during the first 20% of product life cycle. The impact on sustainability is determined for 80% already. And also what I have seen, I mean, that's also attracting me personally very much, that especially in these areas designed for sustainability, we are more at the beginning than other areas. So we can do life cycle assessment, we have material databases, but we are on a blank green field right now, still in the design for sustainability. And looking from the overall perspective, I think if you compare to Tuckman's phase model of group building, we're just in a transition between storming and norming, but far away from performing. So basically, I'm very much passionate to give an impact and spin to the area that most matters for design for sustainability. And also in terms, or might be in terms to some other people, I would consider, of course, data gathering as an enabler. AI is an enabler of design for sustainability, but all of them contribute to the new design for sustainability, to the future of design approaches. I mean, me as a mechanical engineer, I took lectures in university, design for assembly, design for serviceability, and so on. At the beginning, I thought there might be another lecture on design for sustainability. In the meantime, I learned that this is not the case. So it should be across all dimensions and across all areas. And that's where I think a big potential is for helping to avoid climate change in the future.
Okay. And what are the plans for the design for sustainability work group? In which directions are you looking to contribute?
Basically, if you look which directions, and as I mentioned, so technology is one aspect. We have process and people again. So right now gathering people and still gathering information and capturing the overview where the companies stand with their meaning and with their understanding of design for sustainability. So right now preparing a questionnaire where we gather information and feedback from producing industry about their current status of sustainability design. At the same time, we had the interviews, which was kind of an eye-opener from, for instance, our recent interview with Elvira Rakova about air compression and the impact on sustainability. So, but right now we had the gathering call. We will basically continue with gathering some feedback. What are the key areas? And then establish working groups with respect to people, process, and technology in the future. Also having exchange across consulting companies, software providers, and producing or manufacturing companies.
So you are working on our future with the design for sustainability, although with Directin, with Elvira, we also heard that even the power, compressed air power in the plants are also sources of be much more energy efficient, if you think about it. Anyone else that wants to chime in on this topic on design for sustainability? I think we all dream about it, because we are the cause of the 80% of the environmental impact when we design products.
Maybe to connect to the comments from Erik, as the engineer who waited for this kind of courses or dimensions during the educational path and professional path. And Klaus' first comment that there is no really LCA or design for sustainability courses in the engineering schools. Just want to give you one example. We are working with the Superior School that is here in France, is referential for aeronautic engineers. And I just did the curious observation. So we proposed quite different topics on the PLM and engineering for students this year to working as the student project. And they choose one about the organizational LCA, so how we could apply LCA to the whole organization. And it was only one topic that attracts a lot of students who wanted to contribute. And all that other topics was like, it's good enough, but not motivating. So I think they bringing this dimension to the education could be very beneficial. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Well, that was more or less a roundup through the topics that we are dealing with the Green Alliance. Is anyone else that wants to contribute to this anniversary, the 5 years anniversary of PLM and sustainability in action?
Yeah, looking forward to the day where we don't need to express the celebration of this day anymore, but it's quite normal, part of our normal life, to be honest.
Okay, but I see Patrick is also want to join in, and he's celebrating 25 years of innovation.
25
so
years.
We like to innovate and to celebrate.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm a chemical engineer, which thing I studied, and I never did really chemical engineering. I was flushed into the PLM or PDM business then, but I see it coming back, right? So materials, substances, it's I think one of the core topics of sustainability. And this is multidisciplinary, not only the mechanical engineers, but the chemical engineers, the so biomaterials. It needs to be much more multidisciplinary. And we've talked about this in the PLM context for ages, I think. So breaking down those silos, it's even more important in this context. Circular economy becomes more difficult, and I see examples of companies who, especially in the professional area, where they, for example, a power tool company taking back their own products, where they can take back certain components if it's really, let's say, damaged, do the plastic recycling themselves, so they have those materials back again. They know that material, they know what it is, they know the substances in those materials. So it's a very multidisciplinary change of let's say business models that we need to look at to become sustainable.
And it's quiet from your side, Patrick. I don't know if you are in an area where you can speak, but you were also quite involved in our early discussions in the Green Alliance. Any comments from your side that you were?
Hi, I'm sorry. I was not intending, as you can tell, I was not intending to be on screen. So
okay.
Yeah, to the earlier point, actually two earlier points that I heard. I do teach a graduate course in product lifecycle management for engineering managers, and I bring a lot of sustainability into the class, and they are very interested in the sustainability topics. So I think there's definitely there's a generational divide on this, and the 25 to 35-year-olds that I see in my class really pick up on the sustainability topics. So I guess that's a little bit of hope for the future. So.
Okay.
Jos, I wanted to actually maybe close out a few of my comments with addressing that issue that we haven't spoken about. I think many of us feel like we live in a bipolar world. I mean, if you look at climate change in the last 5 years since we've got started, I mean, the CO2 emissions are still at an all-time high. I think they went to 424 parts per million last year. It's up 3.5. It's the largest increase. It was the second or third warmest year, I believe, in the last in history, and we're now the last 10 years have been the warmest. We're going to blow past the Paris Accords of 1.5 degrees C, and we're probably shooting closer to 2.8 or 5 degrees F in warming. I mean, the tipping points are approaching, heat deaths, extreme weather, intensification of storms. There's a lot of bad news out there, and we see it day in and day out. We in the U.S., we still feel it, even though our press and our scientific organizations have become muzzled. We still know what's going on. The disease and human suffering is increasing around the world, the floods, the storms. So, but we never thought it would be the end of humanity. I don't know where they got off on Bill Gates. I mean, I didn't think that this was going to cause Homo sapiens to disappear from the planet. I don't think anyone thought that. We just thought that climate change was going to cause a lot of human suffering. I mean, so that's all the bad news. And most countries aren't on track to meet their goals. But the good news, I think, is that's the bipolar part of this. The good news is even more astonishing than the bad news. Mark, you alluded to some of this. I think there's $2 trillion of investment in green energy expected this year. I think the number is like 600 gigawatts of renewable green energy we've added in 1 year. That's like a double-digit increase of 15%. We got more electricity from renewables than coal in the first 6 months of the year. Most industries are making progress in combating climate change. And so what's heartwarming to me is that this movement is unstoppable despite what my own country, that many times I'm ashamed about and I'm apologetic about, of while we're not just participating, we're not at COP30 in Brazil, but we're actually trying to torpedo it. It brings me great sadness. And I ask for forgiveness from the rest of the world for our lack of participation at this time. But what brings me hope, I guess, if I can end on that, there's a lot of reason for hope. I don't know if any of you follow Christiana Figueres. Forgive me on the pronunciation. She was instrumental in the COP discussions, the treaties, agreements, and she participates in that podcast, Outrage and Optimism. And she talks about the stubborn optimist. And she also talks about that hope is not optimism, but hope is a radical act of defiance and resistance. And for those in the U.S. that are sitting here and kind of unbelieving what's going on here, I think we have to reframe hope as an act of resistance and defiance, that we will not submit. We will not submit to what's going on, and we will be optimistic. And I'll just close on this quote and then pass it back to the rest of you. And Christiana writes, does this mean the end of optimism? And she goes, absolutely not. The stubborn optimism I often speak about is not blind, that things somehow will be fine. It's a clear-eyed recognition of reality, however bleak, that chooses optimism as an input precisely because of the seriousness of the situation and not in spite of it. So, I'm going to, as I retire soon, I'm going to invite us all to continue to be those radical optimists in defiance of people that we're now suffering from in the United States. And I'm just so happy and pleased that I've got a global community like you all to work with on this issue.
Maybe I want to circle it back to our first discussions, Rich. I was an optimist thinking that PLM was helping companies. It was already a 20 years battle of changing behavior of organizations, and there were disasters with wrong part numbers, scrap, etc. And I think also what we are doing in the Green Alliance is similar. We are part of a trend, and it will not be a fast trend. There will be no change from people from the day of tomorrow. It's a movement that is moving in the direction of generations, I think. I mean, the way we live now is maybe not the way my children and grandchildren will live. I hope so. So we are going to meet our borders of the planet, and they will push us again to readjust, I think. And I'm the optimist about humanity in that case.
Excellent.
Yeah. Anyone else that wants to conclude? Then see you in 5 years.
Cannot be topped.
Or
I will be
earlier.
5 years.
in 5 years from now, I will be probably in swimming pants because it's warm enough here to. But who knows? Okay. First of all, thank you all for participating and I would say reviewing this sustainability in action session. And I look forward to work with you in the near future also on those topics. Stay optimistic because we are moving forward. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Have a good day.